coming up in this episode.
Understand your own situation and then adapt accordingly to create a plan that gets you to a state where you can actually start funding, or you can start becoming independent from a job. Then if you've got your idea, let's say you want to create you want to create a fusion reactor that you think you've got the blueprint for that. Then it's understanding what is the most efficient path with gated milestones to get you there. And then you got to secure funding or find a way to fund that based on the milestones. And then each milestone is something that is one big significant step closer to your end goal.
I remember having this moment, I think, in my early 20s when I really started taking my entrepreneurial endeavors quite seriously. Something sort of clicked for me where it just suddenly was just like, oh, fucking hell, like, why didn't I do this sooner? And in speaking to people who have ideas, for a business, or they've got aspirations of being an entrepreneur in one way, or breaking away from the 9-to-5 grind or whatever, there's this paralyzation of fear of thinking it's a really untouchable thing, like to start your own business or to pursue your own dream or whatever, when actually it's never been fucking easier.
The Founders Unplugged podcast, hosted by Greg McCallum. Raw, uncensored conversations with startup founders.
I think we last spoke, maybe was it like August, September, something like that?
I think something like that. Yeah, it was quite a while ago.
Yeah, so we went to CES in Las Vegas in January. We launched Perfector. It is amazing. We've had an outstanding response. We won 5 awards. We were the talk of the town. We featured in over 250 media outlets, and they still keep coming. So it was really, really great for us. It was a really good experience. Not quite the... we thought it would have been a bit more fun in the sense that, we would have time to explore and do all of them kind of things. It was really intense. It was
pure work.
Pure work. Pure work in Sin City.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, and I pinged you some messages as soon as, I think it was like the day after the show, because I was seeing my YouTube feed was just filling up with stuff to do with the show, and I obviously wanted to watch it. And then you were popping up in literally every video I was watching that was talking about like the show and summarizing it. Your name was like in every video. Like,
it's great. I mean, we featured a lot of the top 5, top 7 gadgets of CES among many outlets. So we didn't expect that kind of response. So it was really reassuring for us.
That's awesome.
Being a company in the UK, going to the US, the biggest tech event in the world, the biggest tech stage and platform in the world, and having that sort of a response.
Yeah. Why do you think that was? Why do you think people took to it?
So I think it's multiple reasons. The first is AI seemed to be the theme of the show. So naturally, there was a focus on things that were AI. And then I think most people focus on AI in either a software perspective or in a way that's not like, it's a nice to have. Not to say, our product isn't not nice to have. Whereas with us, we kind of use AI to completely redefine and reinvent a traditional pastime.
It's pretty integral to the product.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, you take the AI out of your product, it doesn't really function.
Exactly.
At least it doesn't function any different to anything else in the market.
Actually, that's not necessarily correct, because we do vertical cooking, and we cook from both sides.
Okay. So in that sense, there's still a point of difference. Yeah, that's true.
And I think that AI is just like the supercharger.
Right.
That AI just really supercharges it, because when people saw the product, they were like mind blown. They're like, they've never seen anything like this.
Yeah. Well, let's take a step back for those listening and watching, because if I've not let you introduce yourself and the products and the business yet. So that's generally how I do it. Like literally the only bit of structure in this whole conversation is just to ask my guests to introduce themselves, business, product, whatever it might be. So why don't you go ahead and do that, and I'll include links and everything to the description so people can check it out themselves. So why don't you explain that first, who you are and what the product is.
So I'm Suraj Sudera. I'm the CEO and founder of SEERGRILLS. We're a Birmingham-based startup, and we have developed the world's first AI-powered grill. Using our proprietary neural fire technology, it can deliver chef-level results at the touch of a button. It cooks at blistering speed, so a 1-inch or 3 1-inch ribeyes, you can do in about 90 seconds, 4 chicken breasts in 2.5 minutes, and it'll be the best tasting food you've ever tried.
Yeah, I can tell you've done that pitch quite a lot. That's good. You've nailed it. Like, yeah. So that's now context to what we were talking about. So for anyone who was listening up to this point, like going, what the hell are they going on about? Yeah. So it's not so. I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head, because I was looking at a lot of other products like that people were reviewing, and they were in a negative light, and they were saying that some of the implementations of AI into stuff was kind of like an AI pillow and an AI, stuff where it's just kind of being jammed in.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense actually when you put it like that a product, it just feels like a really good use case of implementing it. Something that ordinarily would take a certain amount of human oversight and intelligence in order to do something to a standard, and then just bringing it to the next level, along with a piece of technology that's also making it better overall as well. So it's like, yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah, it's been attacked from different domains.
Right.
So exactly. it really is like a shift or jumping a curve, so to speak.
Yeah.
In a traditional pastime.
Yeah. And I was, as I do most days, I had a ribeye on the go for lunch. I literally just ate lunch before jumping on. And as I was cooking it, and in fact, since I've been cooking them, I'm like, one day I'm going to get one of these things. It takes so much time.
Honestly, what's really interesting when people come and try it, like let's say chicken. I know we spoke about ribeyes, and they're just mind blown by the ribeyes themselves. When we give them chicken, we give it them unseasoned.
Right.
Firstly, they're just mind blown at how quick it can cook, and then the fact that it's unseasoned. They're halfway through the chicken breast, and they've realised they've not swallowed any water. Because typically, when you have chicken, you've got to kind of wash it down.
Yeah.
Because
it can get quite dry. Yeah.
Unseasoned, they're not using any water, and they realize that how is this even possible? How is it so juicy? How is it so nice? And so our response to that is that's how good food can taste if you just cook it right. When you add the seasonings and whatnot, it's just again turbocharges that experience as well.
Yeah. I mean, like when we first spoke, I remember telling you this as well. But like as an ex-chef, I find it super interesting that the pushing of these sort of innovations in this space, and we don't see enough of it, in my view. And what's really interesting is the way you've described it to me now and before as well. Is it reminded me a lot of, this might sound like a weird comparison, of the microwave.
Yeah.
As an innovation, because actually one of the best ways to cook vegetables is in a microwave.
Because water. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because of the way that it works, and it locks in flavor. And like you said, you don't really need to season anything.
Yeah.
You get perfect al dente almost every time. And it's like, that's how technology should be implemented. So and it sounds similar to because it's it seems to be locking in the moisture and the speed in which it's cooking. It's keeping that flavor inside, and you're just getting the best out of the produce. As opposed to having to kind of mask the poor cooking.
Yeah, so there's something called the Maillard reaction, and effectively what the grill does, it cooks at really high heats at 950 degrees using infrared, and it does that vertically. And why vertically? So traditionally what happens is you cook food and the heat source is underneath. And so the heat rises, the water vapors and the exhaust gases from the combustion of that heat rises as well. And if there's a pan, then it heats up the pan. Then what happens is you have the moisture between the pan and the food itself kind of trapped, and it's got nowhere to go. So it's kind of, that's use case scenario one. Without a pan, it just kind of goes on there and does a similar kind of thing. So the food in itself ends up blocking the exhaust gases and moisture. So this yields in a subpar sear. Whereas with vertical cooking, the exhaust gases can exhaust out the top without being obstructed by the food.
Right.
Because the heat is radiant.
Because there's less surface area, so when it's that way, it's more directly up. Is that what
it just kind of flows up, and the food's held in the center. So you got the infrared heat projecting onto the food, the exhaust gas exhausting out the top without being obstructed by the food, and then you got the fat dripping into the drip tray at the bottom. So you don't get any flare-ups, because the flare-ups cause incineration of the food as well.
Yeah.
So you end up with the perfect sear on the outside and the perfect wellness on the inside. And finally, the optimum moisture retention, because the height actually seals the moisture in.
Right, and that's key, isn't it? Because the quicker you are able to seal a piece of meat, the tends to be the moisture it stays.
Moisture it stays, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let talk me through this. How did you get here? How did you get to this point? What's your tell us about your background and sort of the journey that led to SEERGRILLS and then the products that you're putting out there.
Cool. So my background is engineering. I did mechanical engineering at uni, and then I did a master's in ophthalmic engineering, which is a branch of my biomedical.
Right. Okay.
So ophthalmic is to do with medical devices for the eyes.
Oh, okay.
And out of university, my supervisor for my final year project had spun off a startup, and he asked me. He said, "Do you want to, what are you doing after uni?" And I said, "I'm going to start my own business." And I had my ideas, and he said, "Well, why don't you come and work with me, and we'll do this." And he said, "Look, just do for 12 months, and I'll pay for your master's, and I'll pay you to do a master's." And I thought, I was 22 at the time. I was like, that sounds like a no-brainer.
Good deal. Yeah.
3.5 years later, we're one of Europe's fastest growing medical startups. I kind of made my way, because when I joined, I was like the third or fourth person there. I was like really early on. We're a team of 60 people, and we had developed in that 3.5 years about 8 class 1, class 2 medical devices. So it's really unprecedented levels of development, because normally it takes about 24 to 36 months to do a relatively normal medical device. So what we did was just turbocharge. And when we did that, we're killing ourselves. We're working stupid hours, working long weeks. It was just very intense. We went to China to visit one of our suppliers, and the supplier showed us other products they were manufacturing, and one of them was a cat flap. And we saw this cat flap, and we, just asking questions, and he kind of told us that they were doing 10,000 units a month, and it's like a 3-person operation running that entire show.
Right.
10,000 units a month. We were like mind blown. We could have designed this in like a couple of months, and here we are kind of developing the most like advanced, medical devices, or some of the most advanced medical devices on the planet. And so we kind of stored the idea of a cat flap, i.e., a product that is mass market, relatively low barrier to entry, a barrier to market, and we kind of just stored that idea that we could possibly in the future do a product like this. And then fast forward to a year or so later, I think at that time I was vegetarian. So my partners, they went to Singapore, and they experienced one of the best steaks that they've ever tasted. Speaking to the chef, they said, why is it so good? And one of the reasons is because they were using an infrared broiler.
Right.
And then another experience in Birmingham, in a steakhouse in Birmingham, led to a really subpar taste. Like a really, it's a high-end steak restaurant, but like a really crappy steak. So when we kind of moved on from that company, it was myself, the founder of that company was my supervisor, and then one of my friends who kind of joined the team. We moved on, and we ended up opening a product development consultancy that was kind of taking other people's ideas and developing them,
right,
without kind of engaging in the business and the marketing side, just the technical development. However, we also want to do something for ourselves. And so, kind of amalgamating all these experiences, we thought, could we develop a grill that is more consumer focused, but delivers the quality of steaks that high-end steak restaurants have? And so it kind of started us as this vague idea, which throughout the development of it evolved into where we are now.
So was it almost like a challenge that you kind of set yourselves? Like, could we do this thing? Like, well, I suppose every engineering endeavor is like, a set of problems that you're trying to solve,
exactly.
Right? So was it like kind of like, here's the aspirational goal, can we make it work? And then exactly. You went off, right?
Yeah.
And were there other ideas on the board as well of different things that you might pursue?
Yes. So basically, I think that's one of the things that we kind of prided ourselves on, was having this ability to really think outside the box and really challenge traditional ways of doing things, and then come up with alternative solutions. Now, an idea is one thing; a fully defined product is, there's like a 95% difference, if
miles
not,
apart. Yeah,
miles apart. So we settled on this because we thought it kind of fit the criteria of mass appeal. Something that doesn't have such a high barrier to entry like a medical device does, because all the regulations.
Of course, yeah.
Later we found out it was actually quite stringent as well, but
right, yeah. But at least initially, you probably thought
initially,
not so.
It was like we thought, okay.
Yeah, food regulation is its whole own thing as well, I suppose. Yeah,
it's gas and electricity power, so that because it's gas powered, it kind of creates its own set of challenges. And so we went on the journey, and we realized actually, if we cook things vertically, this is just like way superior. Oh, and we can do from both sides, and then kind of building. We ended up realizing actually the best way to do this is double-sided vertical with AI, and then that's kind of how we kind of got to where we are today.
So how did you get to that point? Was there a lot of consulting with people who are experts in that particular field, or was this just through trial and error, or a bit of everything?
Not yet. So what happened was we kind of, the timing of when we started was really bad. Right. It was literally a few months before COVID.
Right. Shit. Yeah.
No, sorry, it was actually during COVID, tell a lie. So
right.
We couldn't see many people, we couldn't visit people, we couldn't do any of these things. So we had to kind of figure out things based by reading or researching other products or researching scientific methods, and then the result of them was then implementing these principles into test jigs and testing hypotheses. So in engineering, there's something called a technology readiness level scale. So it goes from 1 to 9, and 1 is like, let's say, an idea on a piece of paper, and let's say by the end of COVID, we had got to like a TR level 3, which is a prototype that cooks, and it cooks really well, and it demonstrates the principle of what we're trying to do. And we had to pause and whatnot because the supply chain got really bad, and all these kind of things. Okay. Nevertheless, we ended up at a point where we realized actually this technology is really promising and it's got legs.
So you managed to do that from conceptualization to a pretty good prototype, all just throughout COVID.
Yeah, throughout COVID, and then yeah, there were some pauses and starts and stops.
That's a pretty short period of time, really.
Yeah, so one of the other things we kind of prided ourselves was rapid product development, and so kind of getting from the TR level 1 to about, I think we ended up doing almost 3 prototypes by just past COVID. I think leading up to about where are we now? 2022. So middle of 2022, we had about 2 to 3 prototypes, and each iteration was an advancement on the previous. And at that point, we realized that actually this is something that can now be, with the correct nurturing and product development, can be transformed into a product that is a serious endeavor.
It has like commercial viability.
Viability, yeah. Up until that point, it was like still, you're just tweaking an idea.
What were the indications to tell you it had the commercial viability? Because like building a product is one thing, but knowing if people would actually want to buy it is another. Like, did you really have a sense of that through any form of research or anything, or was that really only recent? Like,
it's a good question. So, have you heard the saying, if you by Henry Ford, that says, if you ask people what they want, they would have said faster horses?
Yes, right, yeah.
And so, taking that principle, we've always kind of realized that actually, if you ask people really struggle to imagine something that isn't manifest or isn't there. And so you've almost got to be very careful what you ask people, because you've got this picture you've built up in your mind over months and years of how something can be and how it can interact and work. And if I tell you and you've never heard of this before without showing you, it's almost like an impossible task to get you to imagine the same vision that I've created and nurtured over my head. So in short, no, we didn't get any market traction. We didn't, get early adopters or anything like that, other than the early investors and our immediate kind of friends and family that actually tried the food. So the things that made us realize that actually we're onto something here is how quick it could cook. The things that it cooked, like chicken and steak, how nice and how well it cooked them. And then finally, the form factor in terms of size and footprint that we had got it down to. And at that point, there were still massive challenges that were outstanding. At the point we decided that this, because then what happened, I kind of sold my stake of my consultancy, the consultancy business we had started, to focus on this full time.
Right.
So yeah, at that point we realized actually there's many challenges still to be solved. However, there's enough evidence here to suggest that this is something worthwhile pursuing.
And I suppose you'd achieved the main goal, which was to solve that particular problem that you experienced, which is the inconsistency in primarily initially steak, by the sound of it, but like just that initial problem that that you know that exists, right?
Yes.
Other people experience that in the industry, at home, etc. So it's like, okay, we've done that, and actually we've surpassed that, because not only have we made that happen, but we've also made it happen in a very tasty way, right? You know, so then it's like, it's no longer just about matching someone that could cook to a relatively good standard, but actually going to an excellent standard. And that's
Exactly.
like, right, so that makes sense. So that's like, okay, well, there must be a commercial viability. So
Commercial viability. And
yeah,
even at that time, we wasn't targeting so when we say commercial, what we mean by that is that you can there's a possible business out of this, because
right,
in parallel we did obviously research the size of the market and how much
of
people
course,
spend and all that,
yeah.
and it's just massive. So we realized that there's enough of a market for us to launch in terms of commercial for restaurants. That wasn't our initial goal.
Yeah.
We thought this should be a consumer product, because something in a restaurant has to be way more stringent, way more robust and everything like that than a consumer application, and then its own relevant regulations. Now, given the context in which we started, which was COVID, we couldn't have these conversations. So we had to kind of find the path of least resistance to get a product, get the company to a point of positive cash flow. And we realized actually consumer US being the biggest market is the way to go.
And so, yeah, that's a good point. So although the idea may have been born out of going to restaurants and those experiences, the actual end product is direct to consumer.
Yes.
But are there ever any plans? Do you think to go to that more commercial route, or the industrial sort of application of it? I guess you could say hospitality application.
Yeah. So we've got a product roadmap, and so this neural fire technology we've developed is the Perfector is the first manifestation of this technology.
Right.
And our product roadmap actually covers 3 different sectors: so outdoor, indoor, and commercial. And we think that it's when we've implemented in commercial, it's really going to reinvent and redefine a method of cooking.
Outdoor as well. That's interesting.
Yeah. So this Perfector is currently an outdoor product.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's outdoor, and what you might say, why have you gone for outdoor? It's really powerful. The reason it can cook so fast and cooking the way it does, it's really powerful, and that power is delivered via propane.
Right.
So
Okay.
propane powered. It requires a 12-volt input for the electricity for the electronics, but propane nevertheless. And so, outdoor US biggest market. That's the first kind of manifestation. The technology, however, is transposable across other realms. And we've got some really interesting mock-ups which which display what that could look like, and we think it's going to be really revolutionary. It's going to be really game-changing.
Yeah, so it sounds super exciting. So yeah, I guess then the next challenge, which I suppose you probably already started looking at, is how to make that viable indoors with the potential safety risks around propane and I also assume from a aeration perspective and stuff as well, right?
So the indoor one, we think we can make it electric.
Right.
So,
okay.
So to really give it that mass market appeal, and we think at that point,
And you think it'll have the same end result?
I think
or similar.
It will have a similar end result. However, we think it'll be more intelligent. It'll be a lot more intelligent than even the Perfector, which is by far ahead of its time. So,
well, elaborate on that then. So we haven't really touched on that. So you mentioned that AI is embedded in this product in quite an important way. But what is it doing exactly? Why is it as important as we were saying it is?
So, firstly, the way we like to think of it is the hardware is like the body, the physical body, and the AI is like the mind, right? So in a kitchen or in a barbecue, you've got a hardware, but the mind is the operator that's actually doing the cooking. And as we all know, that's a difficult challenge within itself. There's many variabilities that are involved in cooking, and there's at least 8. Food, the food, start temperature of the food, the thickness of the food, the environmental temperature, the fat content, the water content, the uniformity of the heat source. There's loads, and so someone who's cooking has to consciously or subconsciously manage all these variables. Most people get it wrong, and that's why like 40% of food is thrown away, and 1 in 6 people end up with food poisoning. So that there's some, I think like $1 trillion a year is wasted on food being thrown away. It's massive. So what the AI does is it works with the hardware to take all of the thinking out of it. So we say you get chef level results in 4 steps. And what the steps are, you load the holder, you put the holder in the device, you select what you want, and you click start. And when you select what you want on the touchscreen, you want a medium rare steak. The sensors and everything in the device calculate all the parameters of the food. The AI then takes these parameters, takes your preferences to then create a cooking profile to control the dual vertical cooking system that moves in and out, pulses it on and off to deliver you your exact results, regardless of the variables of the food. So it'll do all the compensating or do whatever it needs to ensure you get a medium rare steak, regardless of how thick the food is, regardless of what the start temperature is, regardless of what the fat content is, and all these other things. And it is based on a principle called reinforcement machine learning. So as time goes on, the algorithms will get better as well. And just like your mobile phone receives software updates to improve its functionality, the Perfector is going to get better with time, because we can keep pushing down updates for foods that we haven't enabled capability for just quite yet.
Right.
So if you want some really particular type of fish in Japan, let's say, there's some really unique, and everyone loves it, but we've not enabled the functionality for that. We can push down an update that then gives you the functionality for that as well.
You just need the data and to train it, and
That's
off you go.
Off you go.
Yeah, and is it it's not self-learning in any way then?
It does self-learning as well. So the reinforcement machine learning.
Well, each device will operate slightly differently after it's been used.
So there's 2 sets of data that are being collected. So there's the individual, there's the quantitative data of the food, and then there's the qualitative data from the user who's rated the food after the cook.
Oh, I see. So you can provide feedback to the device.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Now, with them 2 sets of data, we can either push down a local, regional, or global update to improve an algorithm, or provide user-specific updates. So, for instance, let's say if we find, the state of Texas, their definition of medium rare is slightly different to, California or New York or something. We can doing statistical analysis on the data, push down either regional updates or global or even global updates or more localized updates to reflect them preferences. Or you as an individual, Greg, you like your medium slightly more rare than medium rare, slightly more rare than medium, but not as rare as medium rare. So you've got your own kind of niche, and then we can figure that out and then make that specific to you.
That's really quite clever, and I think that to me that's like what I dream of when I think of technology with a component of AI, is that it shouldn't be AI that is either standardized for everyone or specific to me, but somewhere allowing me to pick and choose when I want to know what everyone else's standard is, a regional standard, a global standard, or my own standard. Like, you know what I mean? That's exactly it. And yeah, that's just really cool. Is this the first product you guys had built with a component of AI? Is this the first time you've introduced it into any of your devices, or have some of the medical devices and stuff you worked on?
Yeah, some of the medical devices had AI and stuff in there.
Right.
So our first kind of exposure to AI.
Okay.
From a consumer perspective, yes, because most things we've done in the past are specific to B2B segments. So in what we're doing here, is definitely for the first time for consumer, and it's a lot more that opens its own world of opportunities. We found, we feel like we're gonna be able to do some really, really cool stuff.
Yeah. I mean, you can see where that can lead to. That's an enormous amount of opportunities that opens up with that kind of that approach. This is really exciting. I really want to get my hands on one at some point. It will have to be the indoor one though. I'm not going to get an outdoor one in the UK. So when the indoor one becomes available, then I might take one off your hands.
No problem.
Yeah. Unless I decide to move to a hotter country, I don't know.
There's also like another feature that we're developing. Is called Chef Mode. So Chef Mode enables you to override the AI altogether. So if you feel like you want to have a bit of fun yourself and create your own programs with Chef Mode, there's effectively 2 elements of that. One is you can control the burners live in real time, overriding the AI, or you can create your pre-programmed cooking programs, and then you can save that program to keep running it every time. and that is like if you want your sear in a specific way, or you want your doneness in a specific way, and it's just its own kind of your own way of doing things. You can save that as a program.
That's pretty cool. Do you know what? I was just imagining in my head, very briefly, a world in which I could go to a restaurant and order a steak, and then they scan a barcode on my phone or something that is my SEERGRILLS barcode, because they're a SEERGRILL like approved partner or something like that, and they cook the steak exactly how they know. You know what I mean? Like it cooks it based on my profile, my localized profile, rather than like their, like their general one. That would be amazing. Can you imagine? Like that sort of thing.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Stay tuned.
See, there's the reason why people like us are in this game. Great minds think alike and all that. That's awesome, man. I love this kind of stuff. I mean, how have you found? What's the conversations been like with chefs? Because this, I think we touched on this briefly before. Chefs are purists. Like most people are in most industries. When you get to a certain level, there's a sort of a thing that you consider to be a standard way of approaching it. I know for a fact, if you were to speak to some of the French chefs that I trained with and learned from about this kind of technology, they'd be like, oh no, they'd get really funny about it. Like, have you spoke to some of these kinds of chefs before, and what have their reactions been if you haven't shown them the product?
So we've actually had chefs come and try the food,
right?
And they're actually mind blown. Like they're just like, how, like, this is absolutely mind blowing. So it's quite an interesting one, because we thought we would have possibly got some pushback as well, not only from the purist chefs, but also there's an element of the there's the grill masters that are really traditional as well. And so far, I mean, the people that have tried the food, they've just been mind blown. The people that have seen the technology online or whatever, as bad as it got was there were people that were questioning the AI.
Right.
And so these are people that have seen an advert on Facebook or Instagram, or seen a video, and they've said, how is this AI? And just made some really generalized comment without really understanding what we've done. And kind of, in fairness to them, at the points that, these comments were kind of, there were these comments, we hadn't put much about our AI on the internet either. So we were kind of just teasing and testing the water to see what the responses people were saying. And yeah, I mean, other than people saying, how is it AI, and this is just a gimmick. You got the
which is a fairly valid thing. Like we were saying, like, people are snapping AI on everything now, so it's kind of like it's a pretty valid thing to be critical of, like to say, oh, okay, a fucking grill with AI, like, you know what I mean, like, fair enough. But until you actually, if you were to actually delve into it, but if every other product you're looking at is saying AI,
exactly,
it's going to get a bit tiresome. So I can kind of get that, but yeah.
And to emphasize it, like I said, we hadn't put much about how the AI and stuff worked on the internet at that point either. And so for us, it's all about kind of what is, the least amount of effort for the maximum amount of reward. We're aiming to ship in Q4 of this year. So when we kind of started putting this stuff out, it was more just to test the waters, start generating a bit leads and whatnot, and getting a general sense of what the market is saying and how they're receiving it. When we went to, and that was before CES, and then when we went to CES, like, it was just all of that kind of just washed away. The people that didn't, there were obviously comments on some of the videos on YouTube, on where some people covered it, making similar statements, but it kind of shifted more to a positive, where people could be like, I could exactly see how this works, how it could benefit my life. We got messages from all over the world from people saying, can you ship it here? Can you ship it there? And we're like, whoa, this is insane. Yeah. So, and the way we're gonna, like I said right at the beginning of the call, people really struggle to imagine things. So people can only understand things that they can see and feel. And so later on in the year, we're gonna start doing events in the US where people can come, they can see it themselves, try it themselves, and then bridge that gap of knowledge that needs to be bridged.
Well, my mum used to work, bless her, in towards the end of her career at some point managing what are they called, steamer trade Co. Those I think they've all shut down now, but they were they're basically like kitchen appliance shops. They just specialized in everything to do with kitchenware and tech and stuff like that. So you get a coffee machine, a blender, whatever, right?
Right.
And she would tell me all the time that they would go through cycles of recommending certain products, and they would do displays and demonstrations of them. And if they would demonstrate a product, it would fly out the door. So it just comes down to people needing to see something in situ. They need to be able to imagine it actually in their home, and or see themselves using it or use it. So you just need to give them that opportunity, and then they get it, right? She would say that she would quite often get elderly couples coming in, wanting to get something to do with coffee, because they love a good coffee, and they wouldn't even look at like these high-tech coffee machines unless there was, and then suddenly it was one in display, and then they'd be like, oh right, okay, no, actually this is the thing to do, I might as well spend the money on this. So it makes sense. I was having this thought literally, I think it was yesterday. I was driving from somewhere, and it just suddenly occurred to me how advanced my car is, right? It's a pretty good car. It's a Mercedes GLB. It's got a lot of nice features, right? Techie features that I like, right? Like the LCD displays and seated heats and all that sort of stuff. And I was just thinking, kind of to that quote you said about Henry Ford, where if you had shown someone a car like that in those days and said, well, do you want to drive this? They probably said, no, thank you. Like, no way. Like, that's just scary. Like, it's a spaceship. But so it needs to be basically the cart without the horses, which is what the first Ford was. There's not only from a technical advancement perspective, it couldn't jump from there to there. That just wouldn't be realistic. But also just from the human, the public's response to it, it would be too much, too quick. Like that's what a lot of conspiracy theorists claim, that we have loads of crazy tech in the background, but we're just slowly being spoon-fed because we just couldn't cope with it otherwise. And I think there's probably some truth in that to a degree.
No, it's absolutely true. The first mobiles, or the mobiles, they were able. So you had the Nokias with the little aerial on, like the NEs and whatnot. The reason why them aerials were there was actually because people couldn't fathom the idea that you could have a mobile with an antenna,
right?
And them aerials didn't actually do anything.
Yeah,
and it's similar to there's this I can't remember the exact.
They just added peace of mind kind of thing.
Yeah, there's like a pancake mix. So there's a company that created a pancake mix that all you had to do was mix it with water, and lo and behold, and what they found was their sales dropped.
I heard about this. Yeah,
and then what they then did was they remarketed it, so you had to add an egg.
That was it, yeah.
And then when you mix the egg, then it came back up. And I think, going back to what you're saying, you've got to jump the curve and then iterate.
Yeah.
And jumping the curve is just making that one step that kind of positions your market separate from everyone else, but not so separate that it's alien. And then iterate and iterate and iterate.
I think part of it is psychologically to do with how stupid you might potentially make people feel, right? That you've got to bring people along the journey with you. Otherwise, it can be patronizing.
Yeah. To
sort of say, you've been doing it this way all this time, and then now we've got this thing, and not only is it better than what you've been doing, but you won't understand any of what's happening. Yeah. And like that's different. To say it's better and you get it is one thing, but to say it's better and you won't literally understand how it works unless you go and get a degree on it. That's different. And I think that's where people kind of get a bit put out by that.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's quite difficult to introduce AI to the mainstream. Like we're in this world, so we understand. We talk a lot about AI, and we're keeping our finger on the pulse. But for the general public, they really couldn't give a shit.
No, seriously,
they really couldn't.
It's like AI is this big buzz, and it's like this high in the sky thing that your average person just doesn't know how to access. Yeah. Now, my theory on this is, and if it does come to true, you heard it here first. Everybody, OpenAI, Google, and everyone have entered the AI space. Apple have been very quiet, and I think what Apple's always been really good at is marketing product, so your average person cannot feel intimidated, patronized, and all them things. But like you said, by it. So I think what they're going to do is they've seen all of this AI stuff, but they're going to do it and implement it in their technology in a way that your average person can use it without needing,
or at
degree,
least the average Apple user can
or the
use
average
it.
Apple user,
Because
or the
they
average
see
Apple
them as
user.
two very different
Yeah.
segments, I think.
Yeah.
And the Vision Pro is a great example of that. What you're saying, because you're absolutely right. They took that approach, which was like, let's wait, let's keep developing, let's keep playing, and then they made it perfect for Apple users, but
Apple user,
not anyone else.
Yeah.
But they're not interested in everyone.
They're not
They're
really-
interested in their people, their tribe, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Uh,
it's super interesting. Like, I mean, they're very clever with the way they market, but they tend to be very good at using like they make it pretty accessible for their audience, right? And I think that is missing for AI, because it is quite a complex thing. Even as someone who is quite tech literate as I am, like once I start getting into the weeds of it, I tend to get a bit lost, and I'm like, how does this actually work? But then I think about, well, the vast majority, I'm not a tech founder, like I'm a commercial founder. So then I start thinking about, well, actually, I don't really fully understand the way a lot of the stuff that my devs are doing. Like, I don't really understand what they're doing. I understand the basis of it. So I don't need to know all of it to appreciate it, but I need to at least feel like I can navigate my way around it, right? I think it's the same reason. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the same reason why Web3, blockchain, NFTs, all of that isn't, you don't meet, a bloke down the pub and just start talking about it. Like, it's not captured people in the same way as well, I don't think. But I think AI will get there.
Yeah.
Sure.
No, I totally agree. And on the topic of Apple, I think what they do is they don't necessarily push the technology; they push the experience of the technology.
Right. Yeah.
And we tried to follow a similar approach with how we've marketed Perfector so far, where yes, there's this AI component, but to your average Joe, that doesn't mean anything. Like, it's what you can do with that technology that's more important.
Right, but it's solving problems, right? Again, it comes down to that thing. Whereas, like, if when ChatGPT sort of came out, it wasn't to solve any specific problem. It's just like, here's a thing, use it, and people were creating their problems to then go, okay, well, what can this solve? Whereas, I think you made a really good point. Apple will tend to come out and go, right, well, there's a gap or there's a problem, and this is how you can implement it to solve that, like you've done.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
I think Samsung have done that with, I can't remember the model of the phone now, but they've implemented AI into a phone, which I also saw showcased. I think it was the show as well in Las Vegas. I can't remember. And that's a really interesting application of AI into a device that's, I don't know the full ins and outs of it. I know, it's just very embedded into the device, basically, the mobile phone, in a way which hasn't been before. So it's very intuitive and allows you to interact with your phone in a way that is a lot more like how you would imagine sort of the sci-fi version of that to be. And I think that's probably the direction we're going to see, is it being more just embedded into devices in a way that it just becomes more of an interface thing, as opposed to its own separate component, which I've said since the dawn of this whole AI conversation is where I'm imagining it's going to go, where it's kind of going to be invisible. Do you know what I mean? To some extent, I think that's, rather than shouting about it as much as I don't think that we're going to be shouting about AI being part of technologies as in say 3 or 4 years as we are right now, because it's just going to be a given.
Yeah, fair enough.
Right?
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, just going to be, and if you don't have it, you probably have to stay.
And this is
Sans AI.
There'll probably be a group of people, like pure technology purists, who basically oppose AI altogether, and they're gonna develop products that are, like you get the people that develop black and white phones,
right?
It's
like people who are into vinyl and stuff. It'll be like that.
And stuff, exactly.
Yeah. I'm using Windows 11, baby. I'm like old school, I'm sticking with that. I'm going to keep using that kind of thing. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's crazy that one market segment destroys another and then creates another.
Yeah.
It's really.
I mean, it's how subcultures work, essentially, right? That's where you get rise to them. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, it's crazy. But man, it's just super exciting. Like I love products like this. I remember when we first spoke, I told you how exciting it was to get a chance to speak to you and then have you on. And is there anything you can tease then? But I know you kind of I threw that mad idea out there, and then you kind of said, well, watch this space. But is there anything you can actually kind of talk about what the future of the product's going to be following? Oh, and also really quickly, sorry, I'm going to throw loads of questions at you, and then you can choose which one you answer. But yeah, you said about obviously things blew up since the show, but like, so what's that translated into very literally? Is it like a waiting list that has blown up? Is that how the model is currently working? That you've got people making the sort of pre-orders and that's sort of sat ready to go, and now it's the case of just going into the manufacturing phase? Like, what's that looking like too? So yeah, sorry, two questions thrown into one there.
Sure. So on the first one, the things that I can tease are what I said. It's difficult for me to go into more detail just yet about them.
So just those potential product ranges.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
On the launch and whatnot. So what we meant by it blew up, we won 5 awards, which there's 4,300 exhibitors at CES, and I think there's like 180,000 visitors. So as a percentage for one company to win 5 awards, that was pretty big. That included the CES Innovation Award. That included so that CES has got its own podcast, and the host of the podcast interviewed me, and then the next day called me and gave me an award because he said, this is one of my favorite products, if not the.
Wow.
I'm annoyed I don't have one of these yet. Similar to what you were saying.
Yeah.
So, and then three other awards, and these, it was like, whoa, like this is insane. Especially you've got some of the biggest brands in the world there. CES is the biggest technology show in the world. It's the biggest technology stage in the world as well. So it was it's quite interesting to see, like, we're this group of effectively nobodies, call it, because no one's ever heard of us or whatever, and we're making that sort of impact. And then from a media perspective, I think we thought, oh, if we get into like 8 media outlets, that would be a good success, and we made into Forbes, CNET, CNBC, Tech Radar, T3, Cookout Daily, and Fox News, and it keeps coming. It keeps coming. Like, there's articles still being published on us. We've still got more interviews lined up, and it blew up. And we're like, whoa, this is insane. And then all the best of awards, like Good Housekeeping. These brands that are so big that you would expect the titans of the world to be publishing them. And so that was really good. From a pre-order perspective, so the way it works is, at the moment there's effectively 3 stages. One is the deposit stage, which is where we are currently, where people can go on our website and place $100, and for that deposit they effectively lock in early access, VIP early access, and quite a significant discount.
If you are enjoying this episode and want to support the show, please like and subscribe with notifications turned on.
These deposits then are going to convert into pre-orders in the summer, and then those people that are, the depositors, get early access to the ship, to the devices that ship, and then after that the general public. So they blew up. I mean, on the first day, we got record number of deposits compared to what we had in the past. In the first 4 days, we almost doubled what we had previously.
Wow.
So it was just like, wow, like this is crazy. So, and that gave us a lot of confidence, because again, this is people that CES is actually a trade show, not a consumer show. So we made such a noise with a trade show although people would see the device, we weren't cooking.
Right.
So people weren't even trying the food. So just based on the aesthetics and the way we presented the product, it created a real buzz. So that gave us the confidence to say, okay, when later on in the summer, if all goes to plan, we are going to do events in the US where people can not only come and see the product, but they can try the food and they can see for themselves. And
you in theoretically just upping the game even more.
Upping the game, exactly.
Yeah.
So
well, provided the food comes out okay. Provided no one makes a mistake and buys some dodgy food from somewhere or something like that, right?
It's interesting you say that. Actually, I had a guy that come over. He's from an investment bank, and he only eats halal food. So there's a brand called Shazam's. So Shazam's, like, you get it in Asda and all that, and basically Muslims go to that brand because they can trust it's halal and whatnot.
Sure.
The quality of that food is actually terrible. That's what he said. He goes, it's terrible, but they're forced to have it because the lack of options or whatnot. Anyway, so to cater for him or to host him, we cooked that for him. And there's a testimonial. I can send you the testimonial. He said, "You made Shazam's taste good. How have you done that?" He said you made Shazam's taste good, and we gave him a lamb burger and some steak.
Right.
So lamb burger and some chicken. And he was like, how? So
That's,
when you say like bad food, as long as it's
Yeah.
not going to give you food poisoning, and even
Right.
but if the quality of the food's bad, Perfector can still make that perfect.
I mean, that's interesting though too, because I mean, like from, think of the I could buy a cheaper cut of meat at home, right? Knowing that I'm going to get more out of it. It's that kind of thing of like, you're quite often limited by the things you have around, whether it's the access to certain produce, the quality of your equipment, etc., to get certain results. But if you know that the tool you're going to use is going to get, like, kind of back to my point about the microwave earlier, to get the absolute most out of it, well, I don't need to go out and buy like the absolute premium because I know my pan is a bit shit, or my oven or whatever, and that's the only way to get a really great tasting steak. So I mean, that's interesting because there's a kind of a cost saving implication there, which is actually you can go with the less premium option because actually it's going to draw the most flavor out of it possible. So that's a super interesting too. I mean, like, and then you apply that to the commercial options from the hospitality standpoint. I mean, people are going to love that too because it's like, well, actually, you can make even some pretty standard cuts of meat taste amazing. That's that, and also any idiot can operate it, which in hospitality right now is a huge problem because they've got a huge issue with staff and well-trained people. So that's a whole other dimension there too. I mean, that's a route, commercial sort of thread for you guys, which I imagine you're probably very excited about too. For all of the opportunities that unlocks I just mentioned there from a hospitality standpoint. But I guess probably right now it couldn't be the furthest thing from your mind with the amount that you've got going on with just trying to ship these products and get them manufactured, right?
So it's really interesting. I mean, in the UK, 70% of restaurants have a vacancy for a chef, and it's costing the UK economy, like £20 billion. It's actually a serious problem. Now, just that alone, with the Perfector, let's just say it is as it is, you can get a student to do an equal, if not better job. I say at least an equal job as a chef, and I don't want to say better because I don't want to alienate the chefs, but time in, time out, like almost 100% of the time.
Right. And that's the other thing, consistency,
right?
Yeah.
So it's already, and with that saving alone, because the chef's obviously really expensive, a student in comparison from an hourly rate, it's way cheaper. So just that alone, the return on investment is really quick. Then if you further that more, it's the world's most energy efficient cooking technology. So it's up to 50% more energy efficient than conventional cooking methods. You save food waste because you're cooking consistently perfectly every time. And then it's the time saving as well. So what would take 20 minutes to cook a normal chicken breast, you're doing in 2.5 minutes. So all of these efficiencies combined really yield massive cost, time, and energy savings. And I think if you was to quantify them numbers are pretty significant.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's something I'm always saying to founders that I speak with, especially when I do my advisory work and my sort of pro bono work and stuff, is the product ideally has to tick one of four boxes, ideally all four, which is, does it save time, save money, and does it make more time and make more money? Like, those are the key things. And ultimately that's kind of what you're alluding to there, isn't it? It's like, it's one thing to lower the barrier of entry to save time because of it takes from 20 minutes to 2 minutes, but then it's like, but also it means we don't have to hire such a type of person. It means we can get more food out the door, which means we get more bums on seats. It's like, it's saving time and money, but making more of those things at the same time, because it actually allows them the option to do that, which is, it's kind of a no-brainer in that sense. But it's going to be interesting to see what the reaction is to that as well from a hospitality standpoint. You know what I mean? Like,
definitely. I mean, so we have had some of the biggest food service equipment manufacturers come and visit us and try it.
Right.
And they said you've cracked the code. And so these are the people that supply the restaurants and the chefs.
Right.
And because they have a very thorough, they have really, really detailed industry knowledge. The fact that they said, we've cracked the code was like, okay, we think we are really onto something here.
So that's it. Yeah, that's an important insight, isn't it? And an important sign off to have. So is that something that you're still exploring with these kinds of suppliers and kind of, you know, getting the wheels in motion, or is that really kind of on hold, like I was alluding to earlier, while you focus on just getting
so conversations like that are on hold until so our critical path is to get the Perfector shipping, and so that
makes sense. Because
you know, as a startup, you can easily be spread very thin, and you feel like you're doing a lot, but end up doing nothing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, I think that's a very smart move. Yeah. So what about the manufacturing stage then? I mean, when have you entered to that stage then, or are you still just currently taking deposits and will be entering into that stage soon?
So we open the deposits. We're gonna open pre-orders in the summer. In terms of we've done manufacturing, we've done pilot builds.
Right.
Now, the biggest thing that's preventing us from going into mass manufacture today is the compliance testing.
Right.
The compliance testing is its own beast, and because the Perfector is so kind of ahead of its time, the standards almost are out of date with the technology.
Right.
So we're actively working with the regulatory body to get us to a point where we can commence the regulatory the compliance testing and get it over the line. And as soon as we do that, we can start our manufacturing.
So I suppose that they almost need educating to some degree on what the technology is, so that they can figure out where to probe for any potential risks.
So we've been speaking to them for quite a while now, for over 12 months. So we're aligned on where we are.
Right.
So it's just getting it through the hoops and loops that we need to get it through to get the sign-offs. And that's a 6-month process within itself. So
oh really? Jesus.
Yeah. It's quite a big process.
Yeah. And what kind of stuff are they looking at for? You know, for people who don't know what compliance testing is, can you explain like what is it that they're really looking at and looking for?
So there's 2 elements, or there's actually 4 elements, shall I say? There's electrical safety and electromagnetic radiation safety. So that means that all the electronics that you use, are they traceable? Do they emit any particular frequencies that are detrimental to other electronic devices or pacemakers and stuff like that? So there's that. Then there's the gas safety. So the gas systems you use, are they conform to their own individual standards? So they're not they don't pose a risk. Then there is then there's radio as well. So EMC radio, electrical, gas. Then there's functional safety, i.e., when operating, have you considered the risks to the user? Can they burn themselves? If something went wrong, what safety measures and stuff have you put in them? The construction of it, is that going to withstand weather conditions? If it rained, if it snowed, and blah blah blah, would it withstand them? If you placed a heavy object on there of X amount, would the structure be able to withstand that? So it's basically like if you used to stand back and think, okay, if I was to buy a product, you want some kind of level of assurity. If you went to, I don't know, John Lewis and bought a product, you kind of have this innate trust that the product you buy is not going to kill you or is not going to injure you if you use it in the way it's intended. And in effect, what this safety testing does, or what this compliance testing ensures, that the product that you're going to be selling or manufacturing, it does not pose a threat to the environment and its users.
So pretty rigorous,
very rigorous
set of stress tests, essentially, to ensure this product is safe and functions as it's meant to. It's really interesting, though. Like, would you say that the process, and I think I know the answer to this, but would you say that the process of bringing a product like this to market is simple?
So the process is simple.
Right.
The execution is very difficult. So I'll give you an example. So the analogy I like to use with my team is putting a man on the moon. So, throw back to the mid 1900s. There was the mandate to put a man on the moon. Now, at that point, no one's put a man on the moon. So you've got this really high level goal, and you've got a team of people that have to break that goal down into a set of components that can be assembled to fulfill that goal. I.e., we need a rocket. We need rocket boosters to get this thing out the Earth's atmosphere. When it's in the Earth's outside the Earth's atmosphere, there's got to be systems in place that don't kill the astronauts. When it lands, there's got to be a system. So, in principle, to identify that, you could say it's simple. It still requires a lot of skill, because a lot of people really struggle with. What from my experience, what I've learned is people struggle with breaking high level things down into tangible, digestible components.
Right. Yeah.
Nevertheless, if you were guided or whatever, that process and it's simple. But then figuring out how you implement them components, that is very difficult, because it in effect is like a 4D jigsaw puzzle. Throw in the constraints of time, cost, budget, regulation, and it becomes almost like this impossible challenge that is constantly moving on a day-by-day basis. So it is like, as Elon Musk coined it, it's like eating glass.
Right.
And then if investment was such a big component within itself, I think it would be a lot easier, because then what you wouldn't need to satisfy more short-term goals. You could kind of set out your big goal and kind of traverse that in almost like in a single trajectory. Whereas because of things like investment, you've got to almost break that down into its own little miniature obstacles. What I mean by that is you might need a device for investor demos. You might, and which cause you to accelerate and create shortcuts to some of the development just to get something that's demonstrable. But in the longer term, that doesn't actually serve its purpose.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because if there's a lot of pros and cons to that approach. So you built this product with your own money, presumably, right? The money that was generated from the previous business. So you weren't answering to any outside investors.
No.
Right?
So basically, we took so it's our own money, and then friends and family, and then more recently some angels.
Okay.
So but nevertheless, even friends and family, like you're almost, you've got to update them, you've got to keep them in the loop.
Of course, yeah.
Even to get them on board, it's like, well, here we are, and you've got to almost diverge to say, we've got to create this version of the prototype to demo to them, so they can see. They can see they can see a snippet of what we can see in our head.
Yeah, that's just like another one of those. So like you're saying, you're trying to break down the bigger problem of getting someone to the moon into lots of smaller ones. That's just another element of that in order to be able to succeed. It's in order to get to that, this is now a new component we've got to factor in, which is the money side of it. It's the resources, it's the people. And yeah, that's a super interesting point. But it's interesting because you see a lot of products, or at least you used to. I'm not really sure if it's as popular as it used to be. Being launched on places like Kickstarter and so on, and very few products would actually make it to market. It seems like it sounds. Why do you think that is? Like, given someone who's been there and done that numerous times, so why do you think people struggle to get physical manufactured products out, even with sometimes a considerable amount of money and resources at their disposal?
So it's a good question. That is, I think. People don't prioritize the things that need to be prioritized. So from my experience, what I've seen people do is you've got this product idea, right? And people, they start developing this product, which requires money. And a lot of the time they try to put in so much technology into this one product. What could be a really simple product that's relatively quick to get to market becomes a much more complicated endeavor that's going to take a lot longer and a lot more time. So that's element one. So the path of least resistance to positive cash flow is ignored for path of maximum resistance for path of maximum resistance, because they think, if it had this thing in there or this thing there, it'd be better. So when we were talking about jumping the curve earlier, it doesn't actually require that much more to jump a curve to create its own, category defining product. And that category defining product then becomes, a cash generator and appeases your investors, because they can see that you're focused, that you can do something, you can be concise, and spend not waste money. So I think that's challenge one, is what I'd say scope creep. Let's call it not adding all these other hoops and loops to the product that are just not necessary at this stage.
Telling yourself this is good enough.
This is good enough, exactly.
Get it out. Right.
Get it out, yeah.
Yeah.
And let's just use the analogy of the iPhone, for instance. The first iPhone was crap. It didn't have Bluetooth, it didn't have video, it didn't have any of these things, but it jumped the curve. It jumped the curve, and that's all that's important, because you're trying to show people something that's relatively new. You having you giving it to doing surveys and all this things to users doesn't really add much, because they can't visualize the product that is this theoretical thing that you've got anyway yet. So if you believe there's a market, you can justify a market, you can do all of these things. Get the product in the path of least resistance to there, and then when it's out the market, you'll get the feedback anyway.
Right. Give them something.
Then the other thing is, people try to do too much all in one go. So they think that, because we started product development, let's kick off the marketing, let's kick off, building out teams, let's do all these things. But that's, again, the problem is, if you look at it from a critical path perspective, not everything is a priority. So if we bring it back to the rocket, you're trying to put a rocket, put a man on the moon, right? The first step really is getting out of the Earth's atmosphere. So if you're getting out of the Earth's atmosphere, that's probably your first challenge that you need to solve, in terms of priority. And then once you could do that, then you can solve the next one and the next one.
Right. You're not going to get everyone to focus on a landing process first, right? Step one.
Because if you can't get out of the atmosphere, if you let's just take SEERGRILLS, for example. If we can't cook properly, there's no point spending tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands on marketing. There's no point lining up all these people to come and try your product, because people do that. People end up spending lots of time trying to set up meetings and test groups and all these things for no real purpose. For SEERGRILLS, it was actually called Perfector before. This is probably not very known, but we call the company Perfector. We only launched the brand last year summer. So for the entirety of the development, for most of the development, it was in stealth mode, because we had learned that unless you've got a product, unless it's at a certain stage, there's no point. And looking back, we still launched the brand 6 months too early.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say that to your point as well about just getting it in the hands of people, you're going to get the feedback. Something I'm always telling founders along those same lines, we're very aligned there, is it also helps with messaging. It also helps with understanding what your price should be. It also helps with, so actually, selling informs your marketing, not the other way around.
Exactly.
So, just giving it to people or selling it to them early or whatever it might be, that's the key thing. Because maybe you don't know what the wording or your messaging should actually be on your website or in your marketing materials yet. But once you speak to people, that you'll hear the same phrases come up again. You'll hear the same words come up again, and then you'll know what resonates. Exactly. Once you say it, it sounds really obvious. It's like, well,
absolutely.
Why spend months in a room with a team of people, marketing specialists, all there brainstorming, figuring out the best way to market your product, when giving it to people and saying, what do you think? Is actually the best way to do it, because you'll hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Exactly.
You'll know what words are they using, what emotions is it eliciting, etc. So it solves so many problems. Even to the point of saying, right, how much would you have paid for this?
Yeah.
Or if we were to add this and this, how much would you pay for it then?
Exactly.
That can all help.
It's like the Vision Pro, let's say, or let's say the iPhone. The iPhone's like £1,100 or £1,200 or whatever now. Now, if you used to ask people, before the iPhone was manifest, are you going to pay £1,200 for a phone? You say, hell no.
Yeah.
But then when you see it in all of its glory, not just its glory, in the context of its marketing, its use cases, experiences, it's no longer this binary question. Are you paying £1,000? It's more like, do you want this tool as part of your life?
Right.
And I think, when you ask, because we did surveys and stuff, and it was against my gut instinct, but you live and you learn. We did surveys and stuff. And even at the time, I was kind of just a bit like, I don't think we're going to get anything from this. But, you trust the marketing experts and whatnot. And lo and behold, all you end up doing, it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You ask specific questions that you kind of want the answers to, and then you just end up fulfilling your answers.
Of course, yeah. You're always going to get a confirmation bias sort of from that, unless you're very careful with the way you construct those sort of things. But it's very difficult to do.
And then the problem with that is unless you've got a physical product, you're relying on people's interpretation of words to describe a 3D experience or product. And as we discussed earlier, people are just not good at bridging that gap. People.
It's interesting as well because a lot of, I mean, you know, SaaS is the big thing in the startup world, right? And the vast majority of my clients, my own business is a SaaS product. And like you were saying, you know, unless you've got the actual product, you can give it to people. It's quite difficult to get this sort of this level of feedback and understanding from a market. And of course, with a SaaS product, that's not possible. You can't give it to people; they can't hold it. You know, so I suppose, you know, the equivalent to that is a rough prototype, right?
Yeah, like a Figma mockup or something like that.
Right, exactly. It's like just give them something that they can hang their hat on a little bit to that, and that's a really interesting point because if you know, I'm guilty of going through this process, and I think, you know, maybe that there's some slight differences in SaaS too, where if you go to a well-educated market, you know, who are maybe using competitors, you could probably, you know, in a SaaS space, you could probably get some insight from that. But you know, you're probably right that there's probably too much reliance on that level of feedback gathering and market research. And you're better off just, you know, instead of being too concerned with the NDAs and all that sort of shit, just be like, this is my pitch deck. This is the Figma. This is like, what do you think? What do you think? Have a, you know, what would you do with it? How would you interact with it? Like give something, people tangible things like people often talk about in our space. One of the best things you can do from a launch strategy is have a waiting list, right? It's like, you know, just do that. Show people what it could be, and then there's a waiting list. And
because the other thing as well is even to facilitate these conversations is very time consuming,
right?
And every time you're not spending time on the product, you're spending it elsewhere, and getting the product to a position where it's usable, or, you know, in its very minimum form, let's call it. That's the most important thing, because only when it's in that form can you start selling it, can you start generating revenue, can you start doing all these things.
Yeah.
And so what I've seen about people is the mistakes they make is they do things too early, they don't prioritize. They spend, they get lost in scope creep. They waste lots of money in the process, and literally years will go by and they've not done anything. Yet they've had lots of investment and all the great things.
And so back to sort of like the original thing we were talking about, then I guess this is what you see time and time happen again with these Kickstarter projects, isn't it? Yeah. It's just, you know, and in some ways as well, I feel like what can also be really detrimental to that is having access to too many resources can make people a little bit gung-ho. And so when you see some of these Kickstarter campaigns that have resulted in failed businesses or products have usually been the most backed, like with an enormous amount of money behind them. And I think that kind of makes people a bit what's the word? A bit nonchalant, right? A little bit careless. And they can think, oh, well, we can hire that, you know, that marketing team, we can perform that survey, we can do that focus group, and then just start throwing money at it, thinking that will somehow make it work. And I think, as we know, the more constraints you have on a project, sometimes the better the result can be, because it's forcing you to be a lot more creative with things, and stay focused, like you said, on solving the problems in order and doing things one step at a time.
Yeah, so I mean, the CEO of Alibaba, is it Jack Ma? I think his name was. He said an interesting thing about this. He said when he started Alibaba, they raised like a $5 million investment round, and he then hired, you know, Fortune 500 VPs and everything like that. So then he said to his VP of marketing, saying, you know, create me a marketing plan, and he comes back with a $30 million marketing plan, and he goes to him and he says, we've got $5 million. How do you expect me to do this? Then the guy's response was, well, I've never created a marketing plan for less than $20 million. So that's really interesting, because and you said something just a second ago, which triggered another thought. The other thing is assuming just because you hire a marketing agency or hire a technical team that your headache's going to go away.
Yeah.
Most people even the so-called experts don't get it right.
Mm.
And you got to be very lucky, or almost you got to be very lucky to get the team that you can kind of just give them something and they can get on with it. Most people don't operate like that. And what I found is product development is a very, very intimate and intricate process that requires a lot of attention to detail at all times in every element. And I think what happens with people is they think, I've hired a Figma designer and he's going to go and do my, Figma for my app. Right. Good luck with that, because he's not going to know the vision that you've been creating in your head for the last X amount of months. He's not going to know your level of detail. And just because you said you gave him a two-page Word document with the brief, you think you've conveyed all of that information to him in one go. It's never the case.
Yeah. Well, that's it, and that's why often in these conversations, it moves to the idea of just excellent communication, right, as always being the key sticking point for any startups or business's success, especially when it comes around innovation and creating new ideas or pushing boundaries. Is, like you said, there's that barrier problem of trying to communicate a vision, and that's why I've been on record of saying many times that the number one skill of any CEO or entrepreneur really needs to be sales to a degree, because if sales to me represents the skill of communicating vision, so it's one thing to be an excellent communicator, it's another to be an excellent communicator to the point of sales, because actually that then is communicating the vision in a way that elicits a very real response, like I want to be part of this, I want to buy this, I want to follow this, whatever it is. So there's a very clear distinction between that. It's like the difference between a politician that gets up on stage that talks very drearily about some policy or some legislation, and a cult leader who's able to get people to actually follow them to the ends of the earth. So there's a very fine line, but it's a big difference. And that's kind of what we need.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And for that exact reason, because then people are able to connect their own dots. So once they might not have all the information, but they've got enough. But because of the inspiration that it creates, it allows them to start thinking in the same way as that person, so that makes them go, oh right, I get it, and then they can start making those connections without the need to go through every single bit of detail. And ideally they should then start innovating on top of that, right? And that's really where you start cooking on gas, like, forgive the pun, but like that's or cooking on infrared, right? But that's where you really, because that's when the startups that you see that excel and just shoot for the moon, because now everyone's got that fire and that way of solving the problem, approaching it like the person who came up with the idea, or people who came up with the idea. So that's it's not an easy thing to achieve, but I think it all starts from the top, right?
No, definitely. I think there's three types of people in the world as well. There's those that can think, but they don't do much. There's those that can do but don't think much. I think the combination of the two is the sweet spot. The people that can think and do. So the people that can think outside the box, challenge, question, and then execute on that. And I think what happens is a lot of people are either just thinkers, so they can just come up with really nice ideas but don't necessarily want to execute them, or those people that can just do, where they can receive an instruction and then do what is told, do enough of what's told from. And I think if your team is of the latter, the thinkers and doers, I think that's like one of the biggest components in the success of what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And I think the shorthand for that in our world is that entrepreneurial mindset. That's often what I think people are referring to as what we're talking about, right? Which is why early on, typically you'll see in the most job ads, it says, do you have an entrepreneurial mindset? I don't understand why large corporations make that a requirement for like a customer service person for some reason. I think they've just been copying the job descriptions of like, Yeah, exactly. It's like, our cashiers at Asda need to have an entrepreneurial mindset. Like, why? Fuck off. Like, no, you don't need that. But yeah, interesting.
I think the other thing as well is, the concept, excuse my language, but we got the same, the assumption is the mother of all fuck ups.
Yeah.
And it's almost like you've got to be a bit cynical of things and cynical until you're proven otherwise.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. But I mean, it's always a fine line as well, isn't it? Because you want a team of individuals around you who aren't afraid to challenge, right? And to push things and to test each other's thesis out, right? And take the scientific approach. Like that's the
encouraged thing,
Right, exactly. But at the same time, that you don't want it to go to the point of disruptive for the sake of being disruptive, and it's a very fine line to
balance.
toe within a team. And I imagine, especially with what you're doing when you're talking about things from an engineering, like you said, we have to be very precise and very focused on the allocation of resources. That anyone who's potentially going to go into that territory of potentially sort of challenging for the sake of challenging, or tinkering with something just for the sake of it, like you said, staying within scope, like that's potentially catastrophic for the development of a product, with a huge amount of electrical and otherwise engineering behind it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a bit more about. So I've just realised we've just been waffling on, but I haven't asked you too many questions, so I better ask you something. But I'm curious to know a bit more about you yourself. So you were talking about, especially with your early journey. So going from university and being asked to join a startup. I'm assuming that's paid dividends to what you're doing now, right? Having that exposure so early on in a startup environment. All the lessons learned there. But what was that like when you first started going into working with that startup? And you partnered up, like you said, as a very early employee for this startup. Did you encounter collectively or individually a lot of the mistakes that we're talking about that people make? Did you experience them yourself firsthand? Like, what were the key things that you took away from that you've kind of applied now into what you're doing now?
Oh yeah, massive. So that was a brilliant experience, and it was a great experience. It had its pros and it had its cons. It was a great experience because it allowed me to realize, so to speak, what I'm capable of. So if I put my mind, because you've just come out of 3-4 years of drinking, basically, where although you went to uni, because at that time I stopped
That's
drinking.
such a British way of describing uni, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's basically just 3 or 4 years of partying. But yeah, you're right. Yeah.
I kind of sort my act out now, but back then, literally, it was just like just drinking, right? So you go to this, you've gone from this mode where you hardly go into lectures and doing all these things to you're solving real world problems. So that was really cool. And then I was surrounded by some just brilliant minds, and I think the combination that allowed me to realize, actually, if I apply myself, I can actually do real things, and I think that was really motivating. It kind of was had a good positive feedback loop that did for me. So the lessons were things like focus, things like how what your effort, where your efforts are. Because in them 3.5 years at that company, we did a lot. We did a lot, and it was a lot in and these are really high-end products. So some were our own products that we developed for the company. Others were for there was a consultancy arm of the business for the other clients, and
so really nice wealth of different experiences there as well, just from that dynamic.
Exactly. Now, what we learned was sometimes that's I think one of the reasons we started the consultancy stuff, because the consultancy actually is really well. The products that came through that actually went on to do great things, and they're blowing up in the US. Whereas our own products, where we kind of lacked there, we shelved what we thought was the promising ones for investor reasons or whatnot, and then the later ones, there was the marketing teams and stuff. I don't think they quite understood how to place and position these in the market. There were multiple ways that these products should have been marketed, and I think they chose the most complicated ones. So what that taught me early on was, well, you got to be very careful with who you bring on board on the journey. But also you've also got to be very careful with which journey you decide to go on, because if you're going to go on a journey, a lot of people say you should pivot and you should do all of these things, but that's worst case. Ideally, what you want to do, you want to do as much thinking early on, or what we call planting the seed early on, so as time goes on, you can sit in the shade of that thinking. And so that's why looking back, I even made some mistakes with SEERGRILLS. There were not to go too much into it, but there were easier products or an easier product version that we could have done to begin with, that would have got us there quicker, that would have made us cash flow generative quicker, and all these things, because all these things are very important. Getting to a positive cash flow, or getting to cash flow itself, is very important, because all your investment is based on it, and your perception as a company and everything that is based on it as well. So I think, to summarize the lessons, I think focus is one. What you deem as commercially viable is another, and who you bring into your team is another, and at what stage as well. So that's another thing. It's not because some people are okay, but if you bring them in too early, they're not as effective because they come from a different mindset.
Well, it's like what you were saying about that example with the Alibaba saying about that marketing guy. Like, if you suddenly have the money and you bring on the A players to come and help you too early,
the so-called A players, so-called
A players. I mean, if that's their world, if they're used to that, they're not going to be able to help you at your stage. You need people who are scrappy. You need people who can wear many hats.
Exactly.
Quite often, I think it's talked about in terms of you need generalist specialists early on, and then as you grow and develop as a company, that's when you need more specialists.
Yes.
But in the beginning, everyone is really needing to understand everything about each other. But there was something you really said, really quite interesting in answer to that. My question then, very right at the beginning of your answer, which was you learn what you were capable of, which I think that's super interesting. Like, because you mentioned as well at the beginning of our conversation that you knew that you wanted to start a business, but you weren't really sure what, and then you met this guy.
No, I actually knew what I wanted to do as well. I'll tell you what it was.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah. So at the time, I kind of went through a hippie phase,
right?
And I became like vegan.
Well, didn't we all?
I became vegan and whatnot. And at the time, there was no, there's like Innocent do like the chocolate almond milks and all that kind of stuff. Back then, there was nothing like that.
A friendly reminder to share this episode with your network, like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the show and only takes a couple of minutes.
And I thought, veganism's growing. And at that time, I feel like I was like in the first tranche or the first cohort of vegans.
You're one of the cool ones because you did it first.
You did it first, right?
Yeah,
I thought, I could create business out of this. And we started, I even come up with a brand and everything. It just ended up being parked. But I was a good at least 4 or 5 years ahead.
Right. So that's what. But it's probably a good thing you did because of then you were able to get the experience, like you said, of finding out what you were really capable of, and I suppose then as a result of that, the ambition changed, right?
Yes.
Because if quite often if you only think you're capable of a certain amount of things, you're going to set yourself some targets that are more in line with what you think you're capable of achieving. But once you suddenly realize you're capable of much more, well, those targets are suddenly going to go up a little bit, right? And
Absolutely.
Would it be unfair to say that back then you probably wouldn't have set yourself the goal of releasing a product like this to market, right? For all the various processes that it has to go through, or were you pretty ambitious back then and probably could see yourself to?
I was pretty ambitious because I remember when I went to university, I did mechanical engineering. On my personal statement, I said something like, "I want to solve the energy crisis."
Right. Okay.
So I think,
you're pretty ambitious.
And then even
it sounds like it's the opposite of what I'm just talking about. If anything, you've quelled your ambition to realistic levels.
There's something funny when I was 14.
Just world peace and like world hunger and all that sort of stuff. Just small ambitions.
When I was 14, my ambition was to be number 1 on the Forbes list.
Right. Okay.
It's interesting because I got published in Forbes. We've been published in Forbes 2 times in the last month.
Right.
So
you're getting there to living out those dreams.
Reasons now.
Yeah.
My ambitions changed, but I don't think that ambition was lacking. I think what that company really showed me was, so there's knowing you can do something theoretically, and then there's doing something that proves you know it.
Right.
And so what it allowed me to do was the latter. It allowed me to see that, okay, if I just follow this logical framework, which I think is inherent in my thinking, I can do things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then because we did really crazy things, like we did 3 medical devices in 13 months with the set up manufacturing, launched them in New York, got FDA compliance and everything. That was like, bloody hell, like if we can do this, we can do anything. And that kind of, and there was a reason why there was such a crazy time frame. Things like investment, things like the demands of the business, all these things. Nevertheless, it showed us and proved to us that if you apply yourself, you can do. And I think that thinking came. The only difference was that there we were employees, we were like business owners, or we were like, you know, major shareholders in the business. So transposing that into our own business, that's the real lesson. Like, you can do this for yourself and really reap from it. And I think that was the biggest takeaway. And then since then, you know, it's you know, we did it with SEERGRILLS. Most of what you see has been done in the last 15 months. Because of all the pauses and whatnot, you know, of COVID and whatnot. Majority has been done in about 15 months, which is unprecedented. Yeah. Because I'll speak to people at CES, and some of them, you know, who've launched cooking products, they said, yeah, we've been working on it since 2018.
Yeah. Like, slow grind. Yeah.
Slow grind, yeah.
But that's a really interesting point as well. Like, I remember having this moment, I think, in my early 20s, where when I really started taking my entrepreneurial endeavors quite seriously, something sort of clicked for me where I was just like, I can't remember what it was specifically I did, but I achieved something. It may have been I, you know, secured a contract or one, you know, I don't know, something where it just suddenly was just like, oh, fucking hell, like, you know, why didn't I do this sooner? And in speaking to people who have ideas, you know, for a business, or they've got aspirations of being an entrepreneur in one way, or you know, breaking away from the 9-to-5 grind or whatever, there's this paralyzation of fear of thinking it's a really untouchable thing, like to start your own business or to pursue your own dream or whatever, when actually it's never been fucking easier. And like you don't know what you're capable. More to the point, that why what you said there really resonated with me. It's like, you don't know just how much you're capable of. Like, it's incredible how much you can do if you just go out and do it.
Do it, exactly, yeah.
Right, you know what I mean? Like, there's a guy I know, for example, he's been on the show before as well, and he's a friend of mine, and he runs these networking events in London. And I remember when I first met him like a year ago, he'd only just started. It was like his third event. I help out with volunteering at them sometimes and stuff. And he was telling me how when he first started them, he did them basically because he was trying to fundraise for his startup. Initially, that was the idea. He now just does the events, but you know, and they weren't events on that he wanted. So he was like, well, I'm just going to do them. And he didn't have any money, so he was like, well, fuck, what do I do? How am I going to get a venue and stuff like that? He just went knocking on doors, and he was like, can I have your venue? I don't have any money, but I'm going to bring a load of people in the middle of the week to your venue when ordinarily it's dead. Like, and he just knocked on doors until he got a yes. And like, that's a really great example of just like, you know, there are people who I know who are like, oh, I'd love to do an event, or I'd love to. It's like, just go and do it.
Do
like,
it, yeah, just do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any money. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, you know, the really frustrating thing. It's just like, just go and figure it out. And you know, like, to your point about the landing on the moon, it's like, address problem one first.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
You know, and his problem one was, I don't have a venue and I don't have any money. So, right, we'll go and get a venue then. And it's amazing what you can do. Yeah. But you've got to just do that first step, because sitting down and thinking of all the reasons why you shouldn't do something, you will keep yourself busy for a very long time doing that. You know what I mean?
A decade will go by. Will go by, and you wouldn't have achieved anything. Yeah. It's really interesting because, if you, and I think that, you know, there's almost, whichever way you look at it, there's almost like a law of providence. And what I've experienced in my own life is, if you make a decision, then you almost start seeing the universe conspire to fulfill that decision.
100%. Yeah.
So the people that are like, you know, I don't have any money or whatever, what they're really saying is they've not decided that they want to do this. Because if they had decided they want to do this, they want to book do an event, and they've got no money. If they decide they're going to do an event, instead of looking for reasons not to, they would find reasons to. And then it's only when you start finding reasons to, do you start seeing opportunities. Because of what I think is what is called the law of providence.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, because you're framing the way that you're seeing the world differently. You're looking at it for, right, where's my way in, as opposed to it's just closed doors everywhere. It's like, okay, but where's the gaps? Like, where's the window that I can climb over? Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the way you start looking at it. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
There's something called the reticular activating system in the mind.
Right.
And so, did you ever play the car yellow game when you was a kid, when you was at school?
The yellow car game.
Yeah. So we used to play this game. It's quite an immature game, but
when you punch each other in the arm,
exactly.
Yeah. Now, I didn't realize how universal that game was.
Yeah.
Is that right? Okay, that's cool. I just thought it was like me and my stupid mates. Okay, so that's the thing, is it?
Yeah. So
good.
Normally you'd be going about your day and you probably see 100 yellow cars, but it's only when you it's only when you play the game do you start seeing yellow cars.
Right. Yeah.
And that's basically very similar to what we've just described. And that's because of something called the reticular activating system, which almost subconsciously picks out things that you set it to pick out. I.e., like, you know, you get a new car and you've probably never seen that car anywhere before. You never noticed that car before. As soon as you've got that car, you start seeing it everywhere.
Right.
It's because of this thing. And you can apply that same principle to problems and solutions. If you can establish problems in your head, but keep an open mind with them to say, this is a problem, then your brain subconsciously starts looking for solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. Is it in some way what you mentioned there related to the sort of pattern seeking part of our brain? Because
I believe.
Yeah, must be, right? Because I know that's obviously a very important part of the human, our brains as a whole. They're designed evolutionarily to work that way, for many good reasons. But yeah, that also means it goes the other way. It works from a negative bias perspective, of which human beings are also predisposed to be negatively persuaded. So you know, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if you're like, that's why the idea of people playing victim is quite a popular thing these days, because of it also feeds into that, but then it also enables you to not take accountability. So it's like, it's the conspiracy is against me not succeeding, as opposed to I have some agency over it. And the truth is, everyone has agency over it. Just do something about it, for the most part, right? I mean, everyone is a bit, let's say in first world modern, you know, Western society, maybe, like there's I'm sure there's plenty of other instances where that's not so much the case. It's not as simple, but yeah, for the most part, yeah, it's super interesting. When you're saying you always had that ambition, though, so even like a 14-year-old kid, you know, you could see yourself on an issue of Forbes. So like, were you doing anything particularly entrepreneurial around that sort of time? Like, did you know, the typical like lemonade stand type of kid? Like, what were you doing? Like, and where does that come from? You know, your family? Did you come from a family of entrepreneurs, or is it like, were you breaking the mold there somewhat?
So so it's interesting where that came. I think it came from my dad, actually. So my you know, my dad moved to the UK in, I think, 1990. So and he didn't know any English, didn't have any skill, didn't have any qualifications or anything like that, and he kind of you know, just worked really hard, working like £1 an hour or whatever. And I think that work ethic I saw growing up, and then the fruits of his labor, you know, started paying off. Like, he set up multiple businesses, and I saw, you know, I saw that process of him setting up businesses and, you know, doing well. And this is a guy, you know, that left school at the age of 8. Like, you know, that's as much as he had, you know, back in India. And so, and then I've got, you know, my mom, who's very supportive. So I think I saw that. And then from a young age, my dad kind of gave me like quite big responsibilities. Like, you know, sort this bill out, speak to this accountant, speak to this lawyer.
Okay.
From a young age, and I think partly the reason was because, like the English thing, like, you know, he couldn't understand it as well as possibly I could. Not to say I could, but you know, he just had a higher, I think, belief in my ability, or what my ability should be. And so from a young age, you know, I'll speak to lawyers, accountants, and all these kind of things, knowing what invoices are, knowing all these things. And then he used to take me to work with him, because he used to be a lorry driver first, and then he opened a concrete business later on. But when he was a lorry driver, I used to go with him, where he used to like service the lorries, like take them apart and do all of that. And I used to be involved in that. I used to find it quite fun. So I think that's where the engineering and breaking things up and kind of sense of responsibility came from. And then when I was about 14, I wouldn't say I started anything spectacular. I did do stocks and shares, or, you know, I got involved with that. But what I did start doing, I started watching like the likes of Warren Buffett, Steve Jobs, Einstein, just really researching all these like luminaries and great minds of the time, and literally watched lots of, like, you know, documentaries and stuff. And this just started becoming a part of my psyche. And then I went to uni, and, you know, just got drunk for 4 years. But I think
you probably learned some stuff as well, right? Just to, you know, probably accidentally as you were while you were drinking.
Yeah, it's quite fun. It was great. It was great fun. But what kind of taught, like, yeah, the learning was that actually it's a bit, there is a bit more to life than this. So
Yeah.
it kind of restarted an ambition that, I want to do my own thing, because I did a stint in aerospace for my placement, and I hated it. And I was like, I don't want to work. Yeah, I didn't want to work for anyone. That's what made me realize I don't want to work for anyone. And then fast forward, and that's kind of what. So I wouldn't say. I think the takeaways weren't necessarily like I started lemonade stands and whatnot. It was more that I had studied prominent figures who actually achieved great things, world changing things, and because I did it I think at a young age, that kind of changed my beliefs of what I could do as an individual and how I see the world.
But those are good role models for kids to have.
Yeah,
like, I don't care what anyone says, but whether you're talking about physicists like Einstein or prominent entrepreneurs, business people, whatever it might be, whether it's scientists, people, mathematicians, people who are revered in their industry for excellence, for achieving, like, these are good role models for children.
Yes.
Not Logan Paul.
Yeah.
Right. Although, to play devil's advocate on what I've said there, entrepreneur. He is an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
So that you've got to, but the thing is that people aren't revering these people for their entrepreneurial endeavors. They're revering them for the stupid antics they do online. And there's a difference. And I think I was talking about this with someone recently about how I feel like that they're missing a trick in some ways, actually, a lot of these creators, where actually if they were instead of being so hell-bent on trying to get views by doing stupid stuff, they would sort of peel back the curtain a little bit more about their business and just talk about the aspects of running a business and being a content creator. That would probably net them even more.
Because people want to like, if you have a role model, obviously they've got kids that look up to them. You can influence a lot.
Right.
You can be very influential if you got role models. And a lot of these kids probably want to imitate what they've done, but not necessarily know how to.
And this is the thing. I think some have tried to do that in a sense of like, well, if you want to be a streamer or if you want to be a YouTube influencer, buy my course.
Yes.
And it's like, that's not what I mean. I don't mean like that. I mean more like, make it more generalized. Like, if you want to start a business, this is the things that I do behind the scenes that you don't know about. Like, I have to do this with my lawyer. We have to run this sort of schedule. And it's like, don't necessarily focus on wanting to be like me, but you can apply these things to whatever you want to do. And that's, I think, a trick that's being missed, is talking about like financial literacy and like some of these more dry subjects. But it's like, these are the perfect people to do it. They've got the audience. Like, make the most of that. But anyway, that's a bit of a tangent there. But I'm quite passionate that I think they should be doing a lot more than they are. But I think those are really good role models. And it's interesting what you described there of your upbringing sounds very similar to mine. So my mum and dad are both immigrants. My father came from Northern Ireland. My mother came from France, or Algeria technically. And they both had to create a life from nothing. Like, my father had literally nothing when he came. He always tells me about when he first moved to the UK. He moved to London originally, and then Oxford, where I grew up. He said that it was very typical on like places that he wanted to stay, like bed sits and B&Bs and stuff, to see the sign that said no Irish, no blacks, no dogs. Wow. This was like a thing that you would see everywhere, like rampant fucking racism and stuff. And my mum experienced it too, being from France. But yeah, so similar upbringing. Started, his own business, a builder, and built a quite successful business with my mother, who was helping sort of from a financial and admin perspective, and they ran it together. So I grew up also like you, like going to work with him and stuff. I wasn't trusted to make phone calls like you, but I was trusted to go out and be on site and kind of learn the trade. Like this office I'm in, like I've been over the last year, the summer, I was documenting this on LinkedIn, like me building this office from scratch. Like those are skills I got from him, but it's also the work ethic that I got from him, which I think is incredibly important. And his thing that he always said to me, I think it was a kind of a quote that he might have butchered from what's that famous boxer? Very famous boxer,
Muhammad Ali.
I think it's a quote that he kind of butchered from him, which is to say, like, he'd always used to say to me, I don't care what it is you do, Greg, as long as you aim to be the best at it. He's like, if you decide you want to go and collect bins for the rest of your life, I will 100% support you as long as you absolutely decide I'm going to be the best fucking bin collector on my street in the world. It's like, as long as you strive to be the best, I'm going to back you. But if you're just going to do a half-assed job, I'm not going to back you. And I was like, that's a really interesting, like, take. Do you know what I mean?
Transcend mediocrity, basically.
Right, exactly. Mediocrity and complacency. I think that's, you know, that was the other aspect of it that I've seen as well, having been an employee that's got frustrated over the time. Is like, because where I'm the one that's really wanting to try and be the best in everything throughout my career, seeing people just being complacent in where they are, like there's nothing more frustrating to me than seeing that, you know. So definitely. Yeah, but all of that is just to say that it's a really interesting story, and it totally resonates with me from where I'm from. Although I didn't go down the engineering route. I just went down the sort of more the lemonade stand route kind of thing. I'm just Fair like, enough. What can I build? What can I sell? Right, trying to hustle, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. Like, you know, maybe which looking back was a tough business. I suppose technically the one that actually saw some results was when I was about 15 or 16 with a bunch of mates. Yeah, we put on, it started off as an open mic night and then developed into a music events company, and that was kind of the first one. And then around the same sort of time, I'd also accidentally created a consultancy business for the hospitality industry because I was working in restaurants at the time as well in like you know, as a waiter and then later chef. So yeah, accidentally was being, because again, approaching it like I'm going to be the best fucking waiter. Like, so then people noticed and they were like, Boom. can you come and train our guys? Boom. And then the next thing you know, I had a consultancy, and that was my first consultancy business. Wow. You know, fast forward a few years, and then I was then manager of the restaurant, and then I was training on management. So it's like I'd always had a consultancy business that was running alongside whatever new skills I was learning. I was like, right, okay, I'll put my own spin on them and then throw them out to the masses, kind of thing. So yeah, that's kind of how that went. And then I've obviously done the same thing with my startup mentorship and commercial advisory stuff. But I've got a lot more behind my belt now to offer that. Yeah. Like, as opposed to just, I've been a week on the job, like, you know.
The thing about that is, and I think about this, like, in 5 years' time, you're probably going to look back to this moment today and think, wow, how was I doing it just based on what I knew then? Because every time you look back, you think, you know, as long as you keep an open beginner's mindset, you accumulate so much. And it's kind of what I was saying earlier with SEERGRILLS. I look back and I think, I've actually made mistakes that if I was to do it again, I wouldn't make. And of course, you constantly just keep sharpening your own sword, right?
Yeah, of course. But I mean, hindsight's 20/20, right? But I mean, I think the important thing is to never look. I mean, it's similar to what you're saying about that mindset concept of like looking at everything as you know, where are the opportunities? It's the same for when you look back at mistakes. It's, you know, you shouldn't be looking back at them of like, you know, shit, I don't believe I did that, I'm such an idiot. Like, that's the negative way of looking at it. Instead, it's to look at it and go, okay, well, what did I learn? I learned this, I learned that, and I know how to avoid that, and what can I take from that and apply to the next situation? Like, that's the way you've got to do it, right? You know, you were saying about how there's kind of two approaches in some ways to business of you know, either pivoting or following that sort of straight through line. For me, it's kind of somewhere in the middle where I almost make part of that plan to pivot if needed. It's like, where's the plan B, C, and D? Like, we've got to have that ready. And I think that's the way I like to do things, because I've seen it happen so much now with like the 1,000+ startups and founders I've worked with over the years. Wow. So it's like, like I've worked with a lot. Like I did work with 500 alone in last year. Wow. That like now I've seen every situation, like very few things like creep up on me. So I'm like, okay, we need to put, you know, let's put a little contingency there. Let's put a little contingency there. It's like, in case this happens, that's probably going to happen. You know what I mean? And then also just knowing the types of people, the profiles of people that are in this space. I'm like, there's a red flag over there with that person. There's like, you know what I mean? I'm like creating the shortcuts for everyone. I'm like, okay, now we're good to go. Let's go and see what happens. You know, so.
That's really interesting. 500 people last year. That's
500 founders and entrepreneurs last year. Solos, teams, you know, you name it. Like, it was a crazy year last year. It's because last year I started offering pro bono work.
Right. So people can afford, starters could afford it. Yeah. So what would you say from, you know, that's a big data set effectively that is. What would you say is the key traits that founders or entrepreneurs have that you think are either successful now or are going to go on to be successful?
This is dead easy. Like, I think I've been asked this before and talk about it a lot. The ability to be self-reflective, like, honest, that's all it is. It's kind of touching on what we're talking about to a degree, but it's kind of more than that, in the sense of just being very realistic about who you are and having that self-awareness. That's the word I was looking for. Having self-awareness, being super clear on, or as clear as you can be, on who you are as a person and how you work, knowing yourself better than you know anyone else. Like, that's the clear strength, I think, because without that, if you've got an unrealistic idea of who you are, what you're capable of, then you're always going to be misaligned with everything that you do and everyone you work with and everything else. But it's never going to be 100%, because you're always going to have, that there's a barrier there, being you are yourself. But as long as you're aware of that too and factor that in, and just continuously prepared to improve wherever possible in all those methods we just talked about, that's the number one skill, because with that you can basically do anything. But if you already think you're the dog's bollocks, you're not going to be able to do anything. So, and equally, if you think that you're worthless, then you're not going to be able to do anything. So it kind of goes back to what we were saying. That's the number one. It's the number one thing. And then, of course, there's like resilience, a hugely important, part of that, and et cetera, et cetera. But even then, I would say that if you understand that you are not a particularly resilient person, if you can be aware of that and own it, you can do something about it, because you can find someone else that is. Right. Or you can create a support network around you that can help with that. So even all of these traits that we typically hear talked about as like main traits, like resilience and perseverance and all this kind of stuff of a founder, you don't actually need any of those. You just need to know what your traits are to begin with, because then you can mitigate. The
known knowns and known unknowns.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. But I don't know. That's just from my experience. I don't know. But the thing is, I just love speaking to people like yourself, to founders and people who are innovating and pushing forward. It's why I love doing this show and why I love doing what I do. It gets me pumped. It's energizing, and I say it every time. But founders should speak to founders. Like, this is so, to get this buzz from each other, even if it's a different space or industry. It doesn't matter. Like, because what you're doing is awesome and it's super exciting. As we're nearing the end, which has flown by, it's crazy. As we're on this subject of kind of founders and entrepreneurialism and so on, I like to ask, sort of towards the end of my guests, kind of what would you say are kind of some let's keep it specific, actually, to instead of too general. What would maybe some advice be to those who are maybe looking at wanting to engineer? So maybe people with your kind of backgrounds, engineers who are wanting to build a product and innovate and then release something to market. What would you say are some tips that you would offer there, beyond the stuff we've maybe already talked about?
So the first thing is being realistic about what your own situation is, from a financial perspective, and B, what kind of risk you're able to take. So what I mean by that is, if you're just straight out of university and you can't invest much into your idea because you've got to put a roof over your head and all these things, establish that, because that then informs what level of risk you can take. And if I'm an engineer who's just come out of university and I've got to live, I've got to pay the bills and do that, and I've not got much, then you've got to almost find the path of least resistance to create some kind of a cash flow for a product that's unique, or a product that you can kind of, drop ship or work with a supplier or do something with that doesn't require that level of investment. And that's just to keep you going. That's just to get you started, because otherwise what ends up happening is you're gonna try and take on this, if you want to change the world, unless you've got really good connections as investors, by the time you've actually got started, years are gonna go by. You're gonna probably have given up most of your company away, and it becomes a bit futile. So understand your own situation and then adapt accordingly to create a plan that gets you to a state where you can actually start funding, or you can start becoming independent from a job. Then, if you've got your idea, let's say you want to create you want to create a fusion reactor that that you think you've got the blueprint for that. Then it's understanding what is the most efficient path with gated milestones to get you there.
Mm.
And then you got to secure funding or find a way to fund that based on the milestones. And then each milestone is something that is one big significant step closer to your end goal.
Mm-hmm. Break the marathon down into each mile kind of thing. Right?
Yeah. And
well,
ideally,
this is why we say milestones, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole, yeah.
And ideally, if you can, make them milestones. Do it so, arrange the milestones so they're the shortest traversable journey to get you to a state of positive cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
Because everything becomes easier when you have positive cash flow, or when you have cash flow full stop. You start generating revenue. That's you know, you look at any investor. One of the first things they ask you, have you made any sales?
Mm-hmm.
And if you do, this is a different conversation. If you don't, it's a different conversation.
But equally, you could presumably generate some pretty good results in conversations with investors if you've even just got something like a waiting list, right? For a
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
So you don't necessarily even need to necessarily have the revenue there or the cash flow there. You could just say that there's interest. I suppose both could be considered a form of traction in itself, right?
Yeah. No, it's obviously it's not like never one size fits all, because creating a waiting list, setting that marketing is quite a lot of effort. And so then you've got to ask yourself, is that needed right now, or does that in itself become a hindrance?
Right. It depends on the situation. Like
it depends on the situation,
and the product and the market and everything else. Yeah. Because there are some products where you could maybe jump on a few forums or go on Reddit or something and say, look, this is what I'm doing.
Exactly.
And you'll fill your waiting list within 5 seconds. Whereas others that will involve, you'll need the capital to get it out there and build a waiting list, and vice versa. So good point. And so am I right in the first part of what you answered there? You were talking about kind of positioning yourself in a way to make sure you've got the roof over your head and so on. Am I right in thinking then what you're kind of alluding to there is don't rush to a degree? Like if you've got an idea, that's great, but you've got to prioritize yourself first. So even if that means getting a job at a startup, just getting the money in the door, maybe saving that. Is that fair? Am I misrepresenting what you were saying, or is that kind of what you're alluding to?
But what I'm alluding to is, be realistic about your own situation. You know, if you live in central London and your current expenditure is $3,000 a month, and you're earning $3,000 a month, there's very little you can invest into a startup. Mm-hmm. That's fine. You establish that. Then you've got a choice to make. Is there a way to reduce that and making it, or can you use your free time to then spend that on an idea that is a stepping stone to your main idea?
Right.
Or your main idea is broken down into its own stepping stone that enable you to transition away.
Right. Yeah. I think that makes sense. Because one thing that I think is super interesting, there's often this contradiction we talk about in the startup world of move fast and break things. This idea of everything should have been ready yesterday. But in fact, there is also the contradictory side of that, which I think is it's fine. You've got time. And I think where the reason why that's confusing for some people is you've got to be comfortable before you start making progress on something. You can't have that looming presence of not knowing if the bills are going to be paid or how you're going to put food on the table be a distraction from what it is you want to achieve. So if you can make yourself comfortable first, that's when you can go at breakneck speed. That's when you break things. But if it takes you 5 years, 10 years to get comfortable, then so be it. Yeah. There's going to be another idea. There's still going to be things that need to be innovated, on, and that person might be the one to do it. But don't ruin your life or put your life in jeopardy, I guess, or your mental health at risk, for the sake of trying to pursue something which ultimately won't work if you're not comfortable to pursue it. Right? That would be my interpretation of what
it is a tricky one, because again, each situation is independent. Because equally, your younger years are the best time that you can take a risk, because you don't have the financial, you don't have the responsibility, the family, and all that kind of stuff. You just got to be just true to yourself, and really cutthroat with yourself. And I would just make that, what is that path of least resistance that you can take to get to a point where you can support yourself and do all of these things. And I said the second thing is as well, if you got an idea, try and map it out for the next 5 years. And that doesn't necessarily mean with timeframes, but here's your idea. What does it look like in 5 years? And it's subject to change, as all things are. But as an exercise, it just really helps you to think. It helps you to be more proactive than reactive.
Yeah. Well, every plan has to start with a version of a plan, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you've got to
yeah.
put something down to start with. Yeah, but that's a good point you made. Like, even that idea of getting to the point of being comfortable doesn't necessarily need to be a 5-10 year journey.
No.
If you approach that in the same way,
Yeah.
like, right, I need to get myself to a position where I've got a bit of extra income,
Yeah.
and I've got the time to do this. Then same thing. What's the plan?
What's the plan? Yeah,
Because
exactly.
I need a plan to get to the plan.
Exactly.
So, like, actually, you could theoretically go, right, let's move fast and break things on that plan.
Yeah.
And instead of taking 5 years to get comfortable, I'm going to do it in a year. And you could, if you apply that grit and determination, there's no reason why you can't move things forward one step closer to your overall goal, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Good advice, man. Good advice. Well, look, we've hit time. Like I said, I don't know where the time's gone, but it's been really cool speaking with you again. And I'm super excited with what you guys are doing. You know for sure you've got at least one sale for when the domestic product comes out. At least one, because I might buy more than one. If I want to have multiple, I don't know. But as always, keep me posted on things. Great. Obviously, I'm going to be following along online. I'll put all your links below. Is there anything, anywhere you want to direct people to other than your website, maybe your LinkedIn? Is there anything else people should be keeping an eye out for?
Our socials as well. So it's at SEERGRILLS, Instagram and whatnot. We try and keep all of them up to date.
Cool. Awesome. All right, man. Fantastic. Well, look, have a great rest of the week, and stay in touch. Really keep me updated, and we'll have to get you on again soon.
Thank you.
In the near future to hear what the latest is. But it's been awesome chatting with you, man. Have a good one.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening and/or watching. Please like and subscribe and join in the conversation in the comments below.